Hey, what's up, gang? What's up, gang? Firstly, I have to apologize for my really long absence from YouTube. I know before the new year started, I uploaded one video and one live stream, and that's just not acceptable for what I want to put out, so this is my pledge, my promise, that I'm going to start uploading more. Starting with this video, obviously. And also, speaking of live streams, I'm going to be streaming the Dead Space remake soon, so if you're free and you want to hoot and a holler, please consider stopping in. It should be a nice fun time. Anyway, besides all that, jargon, nonsense, let's get into Valhalla. Going into this DLC, I obviously had high hopes. Santa Monica, from my knowledge, has never released a DLC for any of the God of War games before, besides maybe some multiplayer stuff for Ascension, so I knew this had to be special. But I could have never imagined the roller coaster of emotions I'd be taken on in this experience. This free DLC exceeded any and all expectations I had prior to release. As you can probably tell, I have a lot to say right now, but I think it's best if we start at the beginning. Spoilers ahead for the entirety of Valhalla. Our story starts with Kratos accompanied by Mimir as they row through a mist-covered coastline. Eventually, they reach a beach shore of black sand. Mimir recalls how it's just like the invitation they received described it. Upon landing, all of Kratos' weapon upgrades and his armor revert back to level 1, as him and Mimir head towards a large set of stone doors with glowing runes above it that read, "Master Thyself." Unable to conventionally open them, Kratos brute forces the doors open as he falls into a blinding golden light. Now begins the cycle of Valhalla. Let's take a pause in the story of this DLC real quick and get a bit into the gameplay. Valhalla is a roguelike mode added to Ragnarok, and if you know anything about the roguelike genre at all, you understand how perfect of a pairing this is. Ragnarok already has incredible combat, so having a mode entirely devoted to it and expanding on it was a really smart move. Before you start, you pick a shield, Spartan Rage, and when you get even further into the DLC, a talisman. You proceed through multiple stages collecting stat boosts, runic attacks, and weapon augments, while fighting every manner of enemy from the entirety of Ragnarok in any possible combination, as well as a few surprises, but we'll get back to that later. Actually, speaking of later, let's get back into the story. Since you start your first run incredibly weak, inevitably you die to the challenges of Valhalla, returning to the beach with black sand, as is common in the roguelike genre. You awaken to Freya, Sigrun, and 2 other shield maidens awaiting your return. Kratos lets Freya look at their invitation, which reads, "Kratos of Sparta, you are hereby invited to a challenge. Face the past to face the future. Master Valhalla, master thyself. It's unknown who sent it." With Freya unable to help in the journey through Valhalla since she hasn't died, Kratos and Mimir are truly on their own. But before we enter, Freya lets us know that Valhalla draws inspiration from the memories of those who enter. Definitely won't come into play later. She also questions Kratos on if he's considered an offer they discussed previously, which Kratos responds that he is. This also definitely won't come into play later. Regardless, Sigrun and the other 2 shield maidens perform a ceremony and the doors to Valhalla open properly, allowing us to continue. At this point, the DLC truly begins. Now, I'm not going to get into every single conversation Kratos and Mimir have because, to be completely frank, it's a lot, but just know that we get a lot of interesting tidbits from their conversations throughout the levels. Like learning about Kratos' apprehension with sitting in a position of authority and power again, Mimir's relationship with Sigrun, and more. After getting through a few stages, we appear in a darkly lit room with a throne in front of us. Then a familiar voice taunts us, calling the chair our old seat, and recounting a debt they owe Kratos before we get teleported back to the beach, which now has something called a Tablet of Reflection, which allows us to permanently upgrade both our health and rage meters. Upon entering Valhalla once again, we eventually reach the stage Asgard's Sanctuary, where we see a familiar sight in the distance, the 3 judges from God of War 3. At this point, I really started to get excited because I started to see all these images and visuals from the old games, and it kept making me think back to that little Cyclops at the end of the trailer and got me really hyped to what else we would see further on, so I excitedly continued. After a few more levels and a difficult boss fight, we reappear in the throne room from earlier. The familiar voice speaks once again, and Kratos reaches behind him to pull out the decapitated but still very alive head of Helios instead of Mimir. Now, even though I did get spoiled on this, it didn't dampen the impact whatsoever. It's just really incredible to see a character from the original trilogy re-emerge and get to interact with this older, more experienced Kratos, who's changed so much. The conversations these two have is fantastic, and I highly suggest you check them out if you're a fan of the Greek era of games. Walking a bit with Helios, we eventually reach a recreation of Greece from Kratos' memories. Though we really can't interact with this area yet, there'll be plenty more to see later on. After teleporting, we appear in a Greek dungeon, which Helios points out is the same one in Pandora's temple that Kratos burned that Athenian soldier in back in God of War 1. So cool. Once we place Helios in the very same cage as the soldier, an OG enemy, the Undead Legionnaire, appears. I'm gonna stop with like the stupid voice. Listen, when I saw this dude pop up with the reddish black smoke and the old music, I had the fucking stupidest, biggest grin on my face. I was loving this shit, bro. After pushing the cage along a bit more, we reach the entrance of the incineration room. When the gate closes, a horde of enemies spawn and an L3 plus R3 prompt appears. At this point, I really had no clue what was gonna happen, but I was so ready. And ladies and gentlemen, it is at this point, Kratos pulls out the fucking Blade of Olympus. It was at this point I really started to freak the fuck out. I never in a million years expected us to use this legendary weapon again. The cool thing is you use it just like you did in God of War 3, where it's tied to your rage mode, but it's just like having a completely versatile fourth weapon. It's crazy. Has its own combos and everything. You can aim and blast a beam with it. It's awesome. I mean, if you want to know how excited I was, just listen to my reaction when I got it on stream.
Oh, yeah, we got all these dudes.
Oh my fucking god, what the fuck, are you fucking serious right now? Are you seeing this shit? Are you fucking kidding me?
This is the best thing ever fucking made, holy shit. We get to use the Blade of Olympus again. Oh my god. That's fucking incredible, dude.
After absolutely demolishing the group of enemies, you push Helios into the incineration chamber and notice you need a sacrifice to progress. So you push Helios the last little bit and pull the lever. Not wanting to face what he's doing, Kratos turns his back to Helios when all of a sudden, Mimir calls out for us. Now this scene is absolutely heart-wrenching to me, because at this point, Mimir is legitimately Kratos' best friend and confidant, so to see him in such a dangerous near-death experience because of our actions is so tragic. But thankfully, Kratos brute forces through the cage, not only breaking it, but also the logic of Valhalla itself, and causing both him and Mimir to fall infinitely through the broken realm. This doesn't go on too long, however, since Sigrun flies in and rescues us, returning us to the beach. One little tidbit I gotta add in, I love how Sigrun is like actually a character now. Back in God of War 18, she was just like an incredibly difficult boss fight that we all conquered. But to see her have an actual like motivation and be a character with her own like goals and everything is really, really cool, and I love it. Anyway, once we return to the beach, we see it now has a tablet of influence, which allows us to upgrade aspects of Valhalla itself, like how much currency we get from enemies, boss fights, and more. After another run through Valhalla, we reach the upper realms, aka Greece again, and wouldn't you know it, Helios is back. When trying to go up to the next stage like we did before, it locks us out and says we have to kill 3 of Valhalla's chosen slain as all the gates into Greece open up. Now let me tell you, this is where the meat and potatoes of this DLC are for me. Making your way into Greece, you'll see you're on a timer. The longer you take fighting in this area, the more difficult enemies will become, which is a really fun way to stress speedrunning this section before it gets too difficult and you lose the run. Now this section is amazing, dude. All the callbacks with the scenery and the music are awesome. And obviously, the enemies too, which include the Undead Legionnaires, Legionnaire Captains, Minotaurs, Cyclops, Sirens, Wraiths, Harpies, and Centaurs. And it's just so awesome to be able to fight all these iconic old enemies with this really grizzled, older, wiser Kratos with his badass, the blades and the axe. It's just so cool. I love it. There's even 2 challenge arenas within Greece, like the Aegean Sea and the Desert of Lost Souls from the very first game. It feels like you're playing a Greek era game remake, and it's awesome. Makes me really want at least a remastered collection of the original trilogy, and also Ascension if you want it. I mean, you don't have to add that one in, but at least the first 2. Can you please just at least get the first 2? Okay, not a remake, just remaster, just port them, please. I will pay full price for God of War 1 and 2 to be able to play those on my PS5 without like input delay from it being fucking streamed. Like, it is insane, dude. How have those 2 games not been ported? Just in the PlayStation Classics area, or whatever. This isn't a fucking rant about Sony's business practices. This is a review of the DLC. So we're going to get right back onto it. Regardless, once you complete the required amount of rifts, you can finally progress further through Valhalla, which brings you right back to that Greek dungeon. When we arrive back at the incineration chamber where Valhalla demands a sacrifice, Kratos makes the very interesting choice this time to sacrifice himself, which I guess was the correct one because he progresses. I really like how, above all else, this DLC gives us a new perspective on old classic God of War moments, and we even get to see Kratos' reaction to those moments. I like here how Kratos, to move on to this final area of Valhalla, has to put himself through the same pain and suffering that he put a random stranger through. It just kind of even more enforces his character development and his understanding of the wrongs he's done, and I truly love it. Regardless, leaving behind Helios and meeting back up with Mimir, we arrive at the final challenge of Valhalla, which is revealed to be, drumroll please, Tyr. Now, let's take another pause because I was not expecting this twist at all. Side note, I'm texting my friend who's actually going through the God of War series for the first time today. And he's playing Ragnarok, and he's texting me all about Tyr, where he's like, I don't like that he's a pacifist, but he seems like a pretty wacky character. I can't wait until he fucking realizes, man. I'm so hyped. Anyway, if you've played the base game of Ragnarok, you obviously know the twist with Tyr actually being Odin in disguise. So for the majority of us knowing Tyr, we actually never got to know Tyr. Sure, we rescued him from that Asgardian prison in the post game, but all we get from him is a couple of lines of dialogue and a few poses. So I personally think it was a genius move to have him heavily included in this DLC, to get us to know him, plus to have a lot of setup and lore from God of War 2018 come full circle. And from this, we actually have a much fuller look at the guy. He's wise, knowledgeable, patient, curious, and as you'll see, very worldly. Anyways, getting off that tangent and back to the story at hand, it's revealed that Tyr is in fact the one that sent the invitation to Kratos, and the reason for doing so is actually really wholesome. Tyr posits that he understands what Kratos is going through and believes that the challenges of Valhalla will help him sort out this inner turmoil over becoming the God of War again, and more specifically, what's behind those double doors. Though Tyr also believes that Kratos isn't ready for that, then proceeds to fight us. And let me say, I got absolutely mollywopped my first time fighting him because I was not ready. I just really loved the inclusion of his boss fight. The Greek God of War versus the Norse God of War, and it's this really epic fight. It just makes you really respect Tyr and his strength. Regardless, you either get your ass handed to yourself like me, or you eventually beat him. After defeating him, Tyr states that nobody can truly say if they're ready to walk through those doors, besides the person themselves. So thinking he's ready, Kratos attempts to walk through the doors. But when he sees what's on the other side, he rejects it and is teleported back to the beach. He is not yet ready. At this point, the objective is to beat Tyr 3 more times before Kratos is ready to confront what's behind the door. You may be thinking that sounds kind of boring and repetitive, but firstly, the DLC is free, so shut up. And secondly, Santa Monica makes it actually really interesting in a few different ways. Firstly, almost every run will now have Kratos confront a memory of his past, and you get to see Mimir and Tyr's reactions and perspectives on them. This includes him pledging his soul to Ares, Kratos' blacksmith story regarding Pandora, and many others. I know every single person who's played this DLC has said the same exact thing, but this really is just one giant therapy session for Kratos. It's just, instead of talking out his issues, he fights them. Then you beat the shit out of your therapist at the end of the session. They actually throw a couple of surprise boss fights in there as well as you're ascending the levels of Valhalla, which was really nice to see. You actually get to fight both Magni and Modi, and it's kind of interpreted in a way where it's you giving honor to them after death that their family didn't give them, which is a really nice touch. But I just like that you get a little bit more rather than just the base bosses from Ragnarok. Just makes it really cool that you have all these extra bosses to fight. They also do this really cool thing where every subsequent attempt at the Tyr boss fight, he pulls out another weapon from another mythology, which also kind of spices up the gameplay and it kind of adds to the world building a little bit. So he starts very standard with a spear and shield, you know, cool and all, and it's kind of cool to fight him with your own spear, but pretty standard stuff. Then he pulls out, and bear with me on this one please, I'm terrible with pronunciation, a makuhitl. Hold on, I gotta see this real quick, let me just check.
You are looking at Julian's pronunciation guide, where we look at how to pronounce better some of the most mispronounced words in the world. Makwawitl.
It's called a makwalik, which is, alright, a makwalik, which is an Aztec weapon. Very cool, even though I didn't know how to say it. Next is 2 Egyptian kopesh, It's like the curved sword things, which also look really fucking cool. Then last but not least, Tyr pulls out a freaking katana. And to be honest, the funny thing about this one in particular is Tyr says, I have one last weapon to show you. I think you'll enjoy it. Which, to be honest, I feel like he's talking directly to the player like, yeah, you fucking weeb. You think katanas are badass, huh? Well, here you fucking go. Shing! Anyway, after this long and grueling fight, Kratos finally feels like he's ready to walk through that door. And walk through it he does, which reveals, drumroll please, a black screen. Oh shit, sorry, no, never mind, it's just young Kratos. I'm really sorry in advance, but I just want to gush about this scene for a bit, so please bear with me. I have a lot to say. This entire scene is Kratos confronting himself head on and coming to terms with not only what he's done, but also what he is. There's this really interesting part where older Kratos goes, there is no forgiving you. You chose. Then he realizes it was him. He chose to make those mistakes. This is him truly taking accountability for his actions, not separating the two anymore between young and old self. Because I saw this somewhere where when people talk about the God of War franchise, they kind of separate old and young Kratos as two separate people, but we have to remember that it's the same guy, and it's just, this is his life story, and you can't kind of deflect the blame by saying, oh, it's just young Kratos. It's the same dude, but now he's just taking true accountability for his actions. Another really potent moment to me is right at the end with Kratos berating his younger, darker reflection, calling him cruel, arrogant, and selfish. But then he stops himself and says, you are more than that. You have always been more than what others saw. Which, by the way, is such a beautiful meta way of dissuading haters that used to shit on how one-dimensional Kratos is when, as he puts it, he is more than that. This scene, nay, this whole DLC is about understanding and accepting oneself and your past mistakes. Now with Valhalla, not only is the game of Ragnarok a larger, more worthwhile experience, but also the larger story of God of War as a whole is richer and comes full circle. Just to think, almost 19 years ago, this story started with this very same man attempting to end his own life because of the horror and tragedy that befell him. And that is the first game, dude. That is not only the first game, that is the first second of the first game. He is trying to commit suicide because he thinks life is not worth living. That's not including the death, the destruction, the loss this man has felt and dealt over his many lifetimes he's lived. But despite all that pain and sorrow, despite every setback, every tragedy and hardship, he's endured. But not only endured, but grown and changed for the better. And now this same man that sat on that malicious throne, that throne of pain and suffering as he puts it, is sitting on a new one. Not as an agent of chaos or a lost soul seeking revenge, but as a god of hope. A god in the service of the people, surrounded by his network of family, friends, and allies, and using his multiple centuries worth of experience and knowledge, not for his own vengeance, but to help others. And not to repent either, but just because he can. I'll leave you with one final detail that I love about this, because if I keep going, this will be a 2-hour video. The final track off the score for this DLC is called The Path, the same name as the main quest of God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, and it's also what Kratos calls his mural at the end of Ragnarok.
What did you see in there, brother?
A path. One I had never imagined.
And what now?
There is much to do. Much to rebuild. Would you join me?
Aye.
We'll see to it. Together.
I love this story. It almost paints it in a picture where his late wife Faye saw his future of Atreus taking Odin's side. And through little things she did, like putting her handprint on the, the protection stave on the tree she wanted cut down, forcing Kratos and Atreus to go on this journey of self-discovery and bonding, that she helped change both their fates. And it was this path to put Kratos on to kind of give him the best outcome of his life that he could possibly have at this point, to where he forgives himself and he uses his experience and his abilities in the service of others, which not only helps the realms but also helps himself. It's just fucking absolutely beautiful. It was saying that's beautiful. I have to say thank you, Santa Monica, for creating one of my favorite characters and stories of all time. Your hard work and passion does not go unnoticed nor unappreciated, and thank you for sticking to the end of this video. I know this video is really late, especially on YouTube, where news and content moves a mile a minute and everything, and I'm not making that as an excuse. I've just been tremendously lazy and addicted to Fortnite. But I'm just gonna be trying to put out more content and just kind of have a better workflow in terms of it. This isn't going to be a God of War channel, by the way. I'm just kind of really knee deep in everything. I'm doing a New Game Plus playthrough right now. Oh, actually, that just reminds me. After beating the DLC, you actually get a few surprises. So not only can you use the Blade of Olympus in New Game Plus, which is awesome, by the way. Really awesome. You also get to use young Kratos as a skin. And I gotta say, the story, it's weird, like, it's almost like the beard was blocking certain emotions, and you can see a lot more emotion in the face in certain cutscenes. It's really amazing. Like, I'll throw one right here when Kratos sees the light of Alfheim.
So, did you ever meet Groa? Conversation was difficult, to say the least. What are you doing?
I heard something.
Father, she's gone.
Yes. Keep moving.
It's really cool. It's almost like, I don't know, it's kind of surreal. Like, if my younger self, who fucking played God of War 3 every day, saw this, he'd fucking pass out. It just looks amazing. Regardless of all that, what are my plans next? My next video, in terms of God of War, is going to be a two-parter on where I think God of War 6 is going to be headed, with part 1 being the story and part 2 being me composing the soundtrack for the story that I lay out. I hope to see you there. And also, I hope to see you in my live streams where I'm going to be streaming the Dead Space remake. I hope you'll join me. Anyways, see you there, and goodbye.